I first of all just want to say good morning and a warm welcome to today's Leadership Support Webinar Series presentation. I'm Sandra Ramelli. I'm the Director of Organizational Development here at Hamilton Health Sciences. We are completely thrilled that you've taken the time to pause in your day to join us. So before we begin, I want to start out by saying thank you. I know that each of you have done extraordinary amount of work to help our organization prepare and continue to adjust to our situation. Your dedication, your brilliance, your creativity, and dare I say, we have an aptitude at Hamilton Health Sciences to just grind things out. So all of that has really prepared us well for what we're facing. When I first came to healthcare, I don't know if you guys know, but I've only been in healthcare for 12 years. I still feel like I'm a baby to healthcare. I never doubted the commitment and the people at Hamilton Health Sciences. We do have the best people and probably the most committed leaders. But over the last 2 months, you have proven it again. So thanks so much for everything you do. Before we begin, I thought I would just set some context on how these leadership webinars came to be. So just to give you a bit of history, the webinars over the last couple of months, as you know, we've all experienced significant change. Our leaders, all of you, have been called on to make sense of what's happening, to adapt really quickly, to change how you work, to change your priorities, and probably one of the most important things, it's how you've changed on how you're leading your teams. Not to mention all the work that you're probably doing at home. So in recognition of all of that, we wanted to find a way to support our people, to support them in what they're going through. So a resilience operations committee was created to help our leaders build and maintain their resilience during these times of uncertainty and complexity. And we launched a couple of things. One being, there's kind of two streams to this. We launched supports for our frontline staff, such as the resilience support team, the resilience tools online, and a cope line. And then we created a stream for leaders, and it's called the leadership support. And within that, we started with the coaching series. So if you're interested in coaching, you can always email leadershipcoaching@hhs.ca. You might be wondering what coaching is all about. For those of you who've not experienced it, you might want to take a chance, like the Life cereal commercial, Mikey, try it, you'll like it. Essentially, what it is, it's a focused conversation with a thought partner to help you think through a problem that you might be having, or just to get clear on kind of what action you should take next. Coaching is really grounded in the philosophy that people, meaning us, that we are creative human beings and we all have strengths. We know what to do, but sometimes we're just stuck and we can't see the path clearly. And so what coaches do is they ask you really deep, provocative questions to help you uncover what it is you already know, but sometimes just can't see through it. So if that's something that is interesting to you, or you want to try it like Mikey, reach out to leadershipcoaching@hhs.ca and give it a try. The second thing we did, because again, we were trying to find ways to support leaders, is we are doing the coaching, but we also then introduced another element to the support, which is these webinars. So they've recently been created, and you will have seen a postcard from me with the dates upon which we are covering different topics. So for those of you, like you on the line, who wanted a 1-hour learning moment, these topics that have been created have been shaped by leaders across HHS. So what went into them was feedback that we were hearing through the coaching, our resilience support team out on the ground, picking up tidbits from leaders and staff. And then we also reached out to leaders to check in to say, would these be relevant topics? So what we heard from you was that topics such as resilience, topics on teams, how to lead your teams in these moments, and how to have difficult conversations were some of the top things that came through. So here they are. We're really appreciative of your ideas, your suggestions in helping us shape this series. And we are also really thankful that at HHS, we have a deep pool of amazing talent. And so what you'll notice is that not only will topics be delivered from our organizational development team, but we also are tapping into the rich knowledge and experience of people across the organization, and Diana is one of them. So thank you, Diana, for agreeing to do this.
Happy to do it.
Over the next few months, you'll look forward to bringing you more opportunities. We are also looking forward to hearing what might be most helpful to you so that we can shape these series over time. They're not going to go away. This is one of those things that, in terms of things that got created at HHS, that are probably going to stand longer than our time during COVID. So please feel free to either send us your ideas through that email address, leadershipcoaching@hhs.ca, or through the chat box. We are really looking forward to today, and again, want to thank you so much for participating. I am now going to hand it over to Ash Couillard, who is one of a team member on organizational development's team, and she will be moderating this session. So before I do that, again, a sincere thank you, everyone, for everything you're doing. Who says Hamilton isn't the best? We rock, and you guys rock. Thanks so much. Cheers. Over to you, Ash.
Thanks, Sandra. Good morning, everyone. I see that we have over 130 attendees. So amazing that you're taking the time with us today. Really exciting, and really look forward to having Diana support you through this topic of resilience and just the overwhelm that leaders are experiencing in the organization right now. So before we get started, I just want to go over some webinar housekeeping. Diana, if you can just flip to the next slide.
Oh, yes, sorry.
So before I introduce our speaker, we're just going to go over a few points for housekeeping. The presentation will be approximately 45 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer period at the end. All participants will be muted for the duration of the presentation and the question period. You will notice that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to use this to ask any questions you have throughout the webinar. And we will pause periodically to answer the questions, and appreciating that there is time at the end for a Q&A as well. You will also see a chat box at the bottom of your screen, so you can use this feature to share your thoughts, comments with one another as we move through the session. Be sure to click in the chat box, all panelists and attendees, so that we can all see your comments, because we really are encouraging those interactions among one another. And the presentation is being recorded and will be available by Monday of next week on HHS's YouTube page. And the recording will also be available through the leadership learning bites that Sandra mentioned in your email, which you will receive bi-weekly beginning on May 14th. And if you have any technical issues throughout the webinar, do contact the help desk at extension 4300, and they will be happy to assist you. And then at the end of today's webinar, we will be polling attendees about the best time to hold these leadership support webinars. We want to find a time that best suits your schedules as well as your colleagues. So we will do that at the end of today. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our webinar speaker for today. Diana Tikasz has worked in the teaching and healthcare sector for the past 31 years, including working in emergency department crisis teams, coordinating hospital-based sexual assault, domestic violence treatment programs, and counseling those who have been traumatized by violence, and teaching other professionals how to do this work effectively while staying healthy themselves. Diana has also worked in various employee assistant programs where she has specialized in working with individuals who are feeling stressed by their personal and/or work life. And her passion is to assist people in creating personal, professional, and organizational changes that promote optimal health within the flow of their helping work. Over the past 11 years, Diana has been providing numerous workshops to various helping professionals in the area of caregiver fatigue, secondary trauma, moral distress and burnout, and more recently, she has been working as the Resilience Integration Specialist at Hamilton Health Sciences, a position that focuses solely on fostering staff, team, leadership, and resilience, and physician resilience. So without further ado, I will let Diana take it away for us. Thank you so much, Diana.
Thanks. So good morning, everyone. And I'm so glad we have an opportunity to be here together this morning. Of course, I always find these things challenging in regards to Zoom. So hopefully everybody keep their fingers crossed that we don't have any technical difficulties. And for me, it's always challenging because I can't see all of your lovely faces. So I'm only staring back at myself. So anyway, I know you're all out there. So the other challenge I have, quite frankly, is that this is a big topic. It's a topic that I often talk about for half a day, a full day. So my other challenge will be to do this in a 45-minute way, but I will do my best here. I want to start with just for your own reference, having the objectives up here. And I do this because I also really want to emphasize for me that it is really important that we ground resilience in science, in the neuroscience of how we're wired up, because I think understanding this helps us to engage in strategies that work with our wiring. I also see it as a very non-blaming way to understand what's going on for ourselves and what's going on with our colleagues and our teams. And in this way, because we will all inevitably struggle with stress and adversity. And I think when we ground it in a non-blaming way, it's much easier for us to gain perspective and to support each other. I also think that science is important, and science informs everything we do in healthcare, and our own resilience should not be any different. So, to default into the peer pressure of the Merlot solution, not that I will admit I sometimes do, but as an exclusive way to support our resilience, not necessarily so helpful. The other thing I want to do is also briefly talk a little bit about the multiple risks that are inherent in healthcare, because I think when we're able to identify and name those, that helps us to speak about them, that helps us to feel validated, and gives us a way to normalize our own experience and not feel like there's something wrong with us if we're experiencing moral distress or what have you. And then, of course, I want to spend time describing a framework that's going to help us navigate current adversity, any moments of adversity in our life. And I really want to emphasize that this is a framework. I have been seeing many lists of things to do, the self-care kind of approach. And a colleague of mine says it's a little bit like drinking from a fire hydrant or a fire hose. And for me, I don't want to just deluge people with strategies. I really want to give us a framework that we can ground in, so that we have a model that we can create new habits through the flow of our work. So I'll be spending time talking about that. And so as a start, and for those of you who know me, that I have a strong belief in the power of the pause. And so I will begin today with a pause. And my hope is that this is one of the things that we embed into the way we work in healthcare, is to begin meetings, to begin difficult conversations, for example, to begin huddles with a little bit of a pause. And so we'll do it in a very short way so you can see how quickly this can happen in just a few moments. So I invite you, wherever you are, just to settle yourselves into a comfortable position. And as you settle, I invite you to begin to deepen and lengthen your breathing. And perhaps you may wish to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, because that can help us really focus inward. Really noticing our own internal experience of breathing. And with each deeper, fuller inhale, perhaps noticing how the body expands. And with each exhale, we notice how the body releases and settles. With the inhale, we become more spacious, expansive. And with the exhale, we can let go of what we no longer need. The inhale is nourishing, bringing oxygen to every cell of our body. And the exhale is releasing, letting go, settling. And now letting go of any control of your breathing and simply taking a moment to notice what's here for you now. What's here in thought, emotion, body sensation. No need to judge it. Simply notice and allow it to be here. Okay, so thank you. All right, so let's move on here. And I want to talk a little bit, or as I've said, I want to ground our work in an evolutionary and neurophysiological perspective. Who we are today has taken millions and millions of years to create. And essentially, we actually still have very, very ancient machinery to deal with modern day problems. And how I like to describe this in a very quick way is by using the handy model of the brain, so to speak. So I'm going to use my hand to describe our brain in a very simplified way, but I think it's helpful. And I share this actually with many folks, again, as a way to just really understand how we're wired up and for it to be non-blaming when we move into a reactive state. So this is not my own invention. This was begun by Dr. Dan Siegel, who is a big mindfulness person as well as a psychiatrist. So what we have here is the fist being a model of the brain, and the my forearm being our nervous system that travels through the whole body. So we have bodies, and we get lots of information from our bodies. Our bodies don't just exist to hold up our heads. So so when we evolved, at the wrist here is the brainstem, the most primitive part of the brain, in charge of important functions like breath rate, heart rate. When I open up my hand, in here is the limbic area of the brain. And this area of the brain is sometimes referred to as the emotional center of the brain because of our thumb, and my thumbnail in particular, the amygdala. The amygdala, as all of you know, is the part of the brain that's the smoke alarm, that's always on the alert for danger. And when it sniffs out some danger, it sounds the alarm, and it quickly cascades into a threat or stress response throughout the body. When I close up my hand, up here is the most evolved part of the brain, the neocortex. And up here behind my knuckles, behind our foreheads, is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is like the CEO of the brain, the executive. It has all our executive functioning, our decision making, our appraisal system is there, our moral decision making is there, our links to empathy and compassion are there. So very important part of the brain. Everything from here down is non-conscious. Up here, we have more conscious control. And what I want to say that happens when we are triggered into a stress response is quite literally, we can do what's called a lid flip. And so what I mean is that we disconnect from the prefrontal cortex, or our thinking or problem-solving part of the brain. And you may say, that's really weird, because in those moments I really need that part of the brain, so why does it evade me? And the reason being is, again, that ancient machinery is on the savannah. It made sense that when we were in proximity to a saber-toothed tiger, that the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, would get out of the way so that we could react very quickly to get to safety. So that is still how we are wired up, because evolution, of course, takes a long time to move forward. So the other thing I want to say here about this before we leave the handy model of the brain is that there's actually two pathways. There's a low road, which is really quick, that goes from the amygdala to the rest of the body, that already gets the nervous system in motion before we even know why we're reacting in such a way. And then there's a high road, which takes longer, which comes back around to the prefrontal cortex and helps us appraise and evaluate the information that's coming in. And so based on that appraisal, based on our past experiences, what can happen is the prefrontal cortex can either send a message to the amygdala to say, oh, it's not such a big deal, or it's a false alarm, calm down. Or it can say, this is a really big deal, and it can actually amplify our stress response. And at that point, we might do a lid flip. So I say this because I do want to say that our thoughts and our past experiences have an influence over this non-conscious reactive process. So that's important when we're looking at trying to develop resilience and rewire the brain. So I'm going to now just put everything in the context of our work. And I do want to say that, as many of us know, our work is unique. And I like to use our work in healthcare is unique. And I like to use this complex stress model to describe that. So what you see on the left side, the blue side of the slide, is the stressors that are inherent in any given workplace. And so this can happen in Toyota, in Walmart. These are the types of job stressors where you get a new computer system, and that gets everybody's stress level going, or the conflict that can happen in workplace, or simply having too much to do and not enough time to do it in. That can happen anywhere. In healthcare, we have added stresses. We have the added stresses that come from the content of our work itself, the work with patients, the work with human beings. And so inherently in doing that work, that is what I call trauma-exposed work. Because we are, on a day in and day out basis, we are exposed to stories and witnessing experiences of suffering and loss. We come into contact with that on a regular basis. And I'm going to say everyone working in healthcare. So not just those on the front line, it's also those who support the front line, those in IT, those in finance, those in human resources, because they are also, the content of the work is very similar, and we all come up against suffering and loss and having to navigate that. And when we put the blue, the systemic stressors, and the trauma exposure together, we can actually get a amplified stress response, like that science experiment that we did in grade 3 with the volcano, where we had vinegar and bisodium carbonate together, and we get a bit of an amplified or an explosive reaction. That's the reality of our work. The other reality is this, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I do want to put it out there, is that we actually, there are many concentric circles of risk here. In the area of workplace stress and high stress trauma exposed environments, we actually can't agree on any one definition. And so these are multiple experiences that overlap. They have similarities, but also unique aspects to them. And this is where having an understanding of this terminology helps us to be able to speak speak about it helps us to be able to validate our experience. And so primary trauma is simply, by virtue of being a human being, we can experience trauma in our own lives and in the lives of our loved ones, and we can carry that around with us. We can come into work with that. Work-related traumatic grief and loss is huge right now. The levels, the layers of loss that all of us are experiencing, from the ways in which we used to do the work, the loss of patients, the loss of contact with each other and family members, is huge. And so we haven't historically actually created a space to recognize the loss that is inherent in our work and the grief that's inherent in our work. And so really important that we have, that we do recognize this and that we do make space for it. Direct trauma in over the course of our work. So some of us are more in the direct line of fire than others. And I was speaking yesterday with folks, and there are many of us in healthcare that are really concerned for our own safety, have huge fears about contracting the virus, have concerns for our own safety, for the safety of our families. Those are direct trauma experiences. The secondary trauma experiences, or the vicarious trauma experiences, are the accumulation of suffering and that we witness. And so the stories that we're hearing from each other and from patients, and that those things that are starting to accumulate, that very much influence and shift how we view ourselves, each other, and the world in general. And then we have the compassion fatigue, or empathic strain, which is over time how we can feel quite strained because of the chronicity of the suffering that we are up against. And chronicity in and of itself is very depleting. And then, of course, we have the moral distress and the moral injury that is also huge right now. And I hear from numerous staff how difficult it is for them to witness patients not being able to have the visitors, and of course, you know, there's important reasons why they can't, but it's hugely angst provoking, because moral distress occurs when we are forced to behave in a way that goes against our own morals, values, and ethics, or where we have to choose between two sets of values and ethics that we hold dear. And then the burnout conditions, of course, is too much to do, not enough time to do it in. And then the socio-cultural context of our work. So, and just society. And so we know that not everyone is impacted by COVID in the same way in our society right now. And many groups that are marginalized are experiencing huger rates of illness and death. So that is an overview of and I want to say, we bring that to our work as well. Okay, so I have, actually, maybe I will pause here. I will pause here before I talk about this metaphor, to just see if there's any questions in regards to the neurophysiology of stress, or the various stressors we're up against. And I'll just rely on Ash to see if there's anything there. And if not, I'm going to continue.
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat box right now, Diana.
Okay, so many of you may know that, and my position actually is in the Ethics and Care Ecologies program. So I work with Dr. Andrea Frolick, who many of you know. And I have learned from her the power of the metaphor. And I think the power of the metaphor, just in terms of assisting our learning, but also in touching us very deeply. And so I'm going to attempt to weave. She does it so much more beautifully and poetically than I will, but I'm going to attempt to weave a little metaphor here in terms of the landscape of our experience. And so this is the landscape of our healthcare work on any given day, week, month, over the course of our career. And the path is the one that we want to walk, the path where we want to be the best version of ourselves. And really, this is the path we want to walk at any given moment, where we are kind and creative and patient and all those lovely ideals that we aspire to. I think most of us come into wanting to be that version of ourselves. However, in the landscape of our experience, what we start to find is that we may be pulled off that path numerous times a day. And on the left side, some of the things that may pull us off is the bombardment of news, especially right now, very fearful news, and we can just get overtaken by it, and it starts to really activate us. We can feel the numerous pressures, especially as leaders who are getting it from multiple areas, from executive leadership to the front line, to just coming at you every which way. And at a time where we're having to, maybe we don't even have processes per se to be able to navigate these pressures. And then, of course, because so much is coming to us, it can feel like a real whirlwind of activity. And so all these things on the left are just examples. It's a very brief list of what actually tips us into, veers us from our path and tips us into experiences of mobilization in our nervous system that we are wired up with, that help us give us a quick burst of energy so that we can get to safety. So that's our fight flight response. However, that was meant to give us short little bursts of energy, and we have been having this activated. And so what can start to happen is this exhaustion, this fatigue can start to set in. And we can start to feel more and more shut down, more withdrawn. And so you see as well, the person sitting lonely on the bench. Also in this time of COVID, right? We are the very things that are there to protect us. This physical distancing can contribute to our feelings of loneliness. Those working at home have a very different experience than those on site. But even on site, we have to distance, and we can't fully connect with each other in the way that we would like. And so this starts to create some shutdown for us. And then, of course, well, there's the shutdown. We can completely shut down. And so what these are also survival strategies, or inherent nervous system survival reactions that are more reflective of immobilization, or what we can call a collapse or a faint response, where on the savanna, it may have been more helpful to not be able to move a muscle so that we wouldn't be detected, or to feign death so that we would maybe also not be detected or be left alone. And so this is also equally, these immobilization reactions are also part of our landscape. And so, we can also get stuck in one side more than the other, or we can be flipping back and forth from side to side. And at times it can be really hard to find our path. And let's be honest, folks, I will say, how many of us, and I won't ask you to put it into the chat box, but how many of us are relying on this cycle? Right? So we're using a boost of caffeine to get us pepped up in the morning. And then because we're buzzing so much all day, then we use another substance to kind of calm us down. And it may not be these substances. It could be food. It could be excessive use of social media or Netflix. And so, these are other ways that we may just try to shut down, and not necessarily over the long haul, very particularly helpful. So I want to now shift into what do we do? Okay, so I love this quote. I think it is by Paul Gilbert. I'm not 100% sure, but it's a quote I use often. It's not our fault, but it is our responsibility. So it isn't our fault that we are wired the way we are wired. We come to it naturally to have a moment of reactivity or some moments of shutdown. However, so that's this veering off our path. However, when we veer off our path, it is really, really important that as soon as we notice this, we take responsibility to navigate back to the path. So how do we do that, right? So here we have our path again. And essentially, the ways we do that and what our path is paved with is essentially our values, essentially the things that we hold dear, that are important to us. So our values that are collective values as HHS, our values that are also our own personal values. These are what keep us grounded and keep us walking the path, and we need to find our way back. It is also about post-traumatic growth. And so I'll just say a few words about that for those of you who haven't heard about post-traumatic growth. It's actually very well researched and quite a common experience. A common experience in the midst of adversity or following adversity. And so what it actually says is that in the process of struggling, changes may arise that propel us to a higher level of functioning than they did prior to this adverse situation happened. And so what we see is that we then can cultivate these 5 things. So this appreciation of life, or really it may be a reconnection with gratitude, a changed sense of priorities, which is really our connection to what is really truly important in life, what is meaningful in life, what is our sense of purpose. When we stay connected to our sense of purpose as individually and as a collective community at HHS, that is hugely grounding and hugely protective. I did a lot of interviews last year in a high stress trauma exposed area. And the folks that reported being connected to what brought them into healthcare work in the first place, which was this sense of helping, this sense of wanting to make a difference, they coped and fared much better than folks that were there because of a paycheck. So it's huge. The sense of meaning is huge. And then that third point in terms of our relationships, having this connection. We are social beings. And so I very purposefully don't use social distancing anymore because I don't want anybody to social distance. Yes, we need to physical distance, but we more than ever need to find ways to socially engage, because as mammals, as human beings, that's what calms the nervous system. Social engagement is important for us to calm our nervous system. And then the other piece around strength is our ability to grow in different directions. And then the last one being our sense of hope is truly also really important. And I'll just say here, resilience we can also view as an active process. It is not a static characteristic. We can learn skills that not only develop our own hardiness, but help us to reset, adapt, and grow during these times of challenge, these times of overwhelm. And when we do this repeatedly, we actually rewire our brain. We rewire our brain, get stronger connections to the prefrontal cortex. And the other thing is, and maybe not particularly a good metaphor during COVID, but it is catching. It is, so that's why we have the flame, is that we can grow this resilience. And that's really what we want to be able to do. Okay, so I'm going to go through these next few slides a little more quickly so that I make sure that we have some time for questions. So I'm not sure if folks are familiar yet with the pause, reset, and nourish model, but it is very much a framework. It is a framework that recognizes that as healthcare providers, anyone working in healthcare, we are inherently resourceful and resilient. But during the times of challenge, particularly this time of pandemic, we are going to be challenged in our own resilience. And so we have come up with a framework that helps us and is very much grounded in science and helps us to develop new habits where we are attending to ourselves and each other through the course of our day. This is not a self-care model per se. I think historically, when we have talked about these kinds of issues about, secondary trauma and so on, that what happens is we say, well, you have to do self-care. And I think the self-care message inherently says this is something that we do on our own time. And so we have to wait until after hours or the weekend or on vacation. The other thing that I don't really like about the self-care message is that I feel it's a little blaming in some way, because we are going to inevitably struggle with our our exposure, our trauma exposure. That's inevitable. That's inherent in our work. And if there's just a self-care message, what happens is then we think, I've screwed up. I haven't done enough self-care and that's why I'm struggling. And that is not the case. And so we want to offer this framework instead that starts to say it is important for us in healthcare to weave throughout our work shift various little moments where we are going to pause, reset, and nourish. And so I'll break those down each individually, but I want to say that this then becomes our compass. It becomes the compass that helps us find the path over and over and over again. Each time we veer off, we use a pause, reset, nourish to bring us back to our path, to get us on the course for our true north and the best version of ourselves, both individually and collectively. So the pause part, we did already at the beginning of this. I think everything begins with a pause because without awareness, we have no choice. So we need to first become aware of what's here for us now in order to make a change. And again, becoming aware and going into choice, these are prefrontal cortex activities. So simply by doing that, we are engaging the prefrontal cortex and minimizing the ability to for this lid flip to happen. So we want to notice what's here in thought, emotion, body sensation. And ideally, we want to do this without judgment, because if we're judging, that's an internal threat, and that's going to amp up our stress response. Okay, so judgment, not helpful. Not helpful, but when you start to, at least if any of you are like me, when you start to notice, you can see how much judgment is there. We also have a tool at HHS. For many of you who have, and your staff who have engaged in the Working Mind workshops, this is a very helpful tool in terms of when we pause. Am I in green zone? Am I in yellow? And am I in orange? Or am I really in red, which I would say is a complete lid flip? And so it's important that we notice. We want to notice when we're in the yellow and orange section, so that we have the ability, right? There's a two-way arrow there, that we have the ability to move, to get closer onto our path, which is the green area there. So reset. So these are the mini micro strategies that we weave in throughout the day. And all of you already do reset activities. You all have your own. And I would love if people in the chat box would even type in, what are the mini practices that you do to reset yourselves throughout the day? And here I'll show you some of mine. I think breath is always a good one. And with breath, we can actually, when we take a longer exhale than inhale, we are calming the nervous system. When we engage with our sense of purpose, our values, when we remind ourselves, why am I here? That is very grounding. The experience of putting all our attention into our feet on the floor is also very grounding. Just taking some moments to move in through our senses, to notice external sound, notice internal body sensation, and to move back and forth in a few seconds can also be very grounding. Connecting with our sense of compassion and self-compassion, our sense of gratitude, or what's going right in this moment. Singing actually activates our vagus nerve and helps us to, there's a whole theory around this, but whole science around this, but these soothing vocalizations and singing actually connect us to our social engagement and calm the nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, calms the parasympathetic nervous system. Resiliency slogans I like. So you got this, or I don't know, there's so many. Mine for me is from a teacher of mine is to be the rock in the raging river. Sharing a joke or good news, connecting with somebody. Moving our bodies. The OMDP is the 1 minute dance party. We're starting to get some tweets around people having 1 minute dance parties. We can do those at home, at work. They can be quite helpful in changing the experience in our nervous system. There are many, many other strategies on the in the toolkit itself if you run out of ideas. Also taking those moments of transition, and I'll show you for folks who haven't maybe seen these posters. So the start of the day checklist and the end of the day checklist. So this is just a way to help us pause, reset, and nourish, to be a little bit more thoughtful about our times of transition. So these do not necessarily take any more time. It just takes our commitment to set our intention to give these things some attention. And so we can, I know many folks are bringing these strategies to Huddle. We can use any of the reset strategies in Huddle to do a collective pause, to do a collective check-in, to do a collective celebration of what we can be grateful for today. Whatever it is, these tools are in the toolbox to on the Resilient Support Toolkit to help you. And then the Nourish. So this is a very important step, folks. We have a negativity bias that says that we will register a negative instantaneously because that's our survival legacy. If we didn't register a negative instantaneously, we did not survive the savannah. Our optimistic ancestors were all eaten by the saber-toothed tigers because they were not on the lookout for danger. So we really have to pay attention to the positive. And the science says about 20 seconds. So when we do a pause, reset, and nourish, what we want to do is pay attention to the shift that has created, to the fact that we have taken a moment to do something good for ourselves. And in doing something good for ourselves, we do something good for each other because we also resonate with each other. So if we can create a sense of calm for ourselves, we are resonating that out to our teams as well, which is why it's so critically important for you as leaders to be practicing these things first. I often get the question, what do I do to support my team? I think the first thing you do to support your team is that you walk the talk and you live these strategies, this framework. So this was the neuroplasticity piece. And so with repetition, we are actually going to create neural networks, new neural networks in new neural pathways in our brain. And we will get denser neurocircuitry in the prefrontal cortex, which will help keep our prefrontal cortex attached, versus if we activate the amygdala too much, the amygdala grows, and we don't want the amygdala to get too big. We want to have a strong prefrontal cortex. So this is what Sandra was referring to in terms of the Resilient Suite of Services. It's the poster that outlines that, and I'm coming to an end here, folks. I do particularly want to highlight the COPE line. So the COPE line was launched last week. It is truly peer support for the very first time at HHS. And so what we are doing here is that our people are helping our people because we understand the context of our work. So it's not to take the place of our EAP services or any kind of psychotherapy. It is truly meant to, and sorry, I have a tickle here. Excuse me a minute. I'm talking too fast. Okay, so truly it is meant to be a resource that is validating. It is not a crisis line. And so this is really important to let your staff know that we are meant to be called when you're having a bad day or a bad moment. It is when you are feeling distressed. It doesn't have to get to the point of crisis before you give us a call. And last week, we had somebody who called in who said that they had gone to their manager feeling stressed, and the manager had said, why don't you take a few moments, go into a quiet space and call the COPE line? Like, yay, this is what we're encouraging all of you to do, and also use the line. Please use the line yourselves. So I want to kind of end with this. which is that this quote, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. So very much we want to be able to take this moment to, and take these moments to reflect on what is the good that can come out of this current adversity. How can this maybe be a wake-up call? Because I think many of us came into this already depleted, already feeling challenged because of what the state of healthcare, the state of hallway medicine, all these things that were hugely challenging for all of us. And so, so how do we now reflect on all of these things, reflect on our experience so that we can reconstruct, we can create something different? And at the bottom of the page here, I have put a link in, and I'm not sure if it'll work, but if you go to YouTube and search The Great Realization, I think it's a beautiful 4-minute video that really shows collectively, globally, how we can take this time to create change, to build a new resilient world. So on that note, I will pause, and wow, we've got 9 minutes left. So I really do hope there are some questions. And I will put that image up there. And Ash, are there things that maybe have come up?
Yeah, so we do have several questions in the chat box, and thank you so much, Diana, for providing so many tools for our leaders to support their resilience during this time. So we'll start with the first question from Jenny Seaman.
Mm-hmm.
PRN Framework is excellent. During this stressful time, most staff at HHS have been amazing. Patient, helpful, responsive. A small minority of people have seemed stressed or frustrated. Is there any way to cue someone that they may need to reset, or can we just reset ourselves?
Well, okay, great question. So I'm going to say yes, I would first of all reset yourself, because you do have control, right? We always have control. Once we become aware that our stress response has been activated, we have control over calming ourselves. We don't have control necessarily over what another person will do. And so I actually referred to this a little bit as my superpower that I'm now sharing with everybody else. And I often do it if I know I'm going into a stressful conversation or a stressful meeting, is I will make sure that I'm doing some work beforehand and during to really stay calm and grounded. So that, because we do know, and there is science about how that resonates out. We know that after a few moments, the most dominant emotion in a meeting room, that's everybody else is going to resonate with that. So let's resonate with calmness versus frenetic activity. So that is absolutely the first step. And then I think the other is certainly we want to engage in a compassionate conversation with that person if we feel able to. I like to frame it in, my way is to frame it in some of the neuroscience I gave you, so that that it's not so blaming, or that it doesn't feel blaming. Because also many of us have our own stressors personally, have traumatic pasts that may activate us more than somebody who hasn't had those experiences. And so, we want to approach a conversation with that perspective. And then I think we can start to, I talk a lot about planting seeds. So let's, these conversations may happen in little tiny bits. And so how do we plant the seed every little time? And maybe even as a team, as we're collectively starting to engage in PRN, that also starts to have a tipping point. And so we're approaching that person out of that place of compassion and saying, I'm really worried about you. And I think, we're good at that. I think most managers are really good at that. And then, have you heard about PRN? And we can start to be talking to each other about PRN in a kind way. I think sometimes we just have to I was at a huddle yesterday where the manager did a beautiful job of reminding everyone to go in, to shift into their more kind selves. She really did a great job of saying, yes, we're all afraid now. We're all going to have those moments, but we can also shift into that place of kindness. And this is a repeated message that gets sent, because we need to repeat. Neuroplasticity says small and often, small and often. Okay, I'll stop there because I know I can go on and on.
Thank you. So the second question is from Tanya Chow. Mm-hmm. And the question is, can these start of day and end of day resilience checklists be emailed to the participants?
Absolutely. I think if there is a way that Ash can do it, but otherwise you can find them in the Resilience Resource Toolkit. There is a tab in there that has graphics, and they're there so that you can print them off. You can also, if you want to, you can send us an email at resilience. So the email is resilience@hhs.ca. And we will see if we can get some posters to you. We have another batch on order where they're laminated so that we can bring them to units that may like to have them.
Thanks, Diana. And the last question is from Sherilyn. Who is staffing the COPE line, and how does one go about volunteering?
Okay, so we have a multidisciplinary team staffing the COPE line, and some folks right now have been redeployed from the their work elsewhere to people the COPE line, and they certainly have had some experience through their work with mental health. And then we've done some training as well in terms of peer support model, because peer support model really is not about, it's not therapeutic clinical, it's not a therapeutic clinical approach. So it is a multidisciplinary group of folks. We, and we've had lots of people wanting to volunteer. So again, I would say, maybe send me an email at Tikasz@hhs or michellecassidy.ca, because we know we're going to have to, as services start to get on board or ramp up again, and people are going back to their home programs, we're going to need to pivot how we are offering these services, because as Sandra said, we want these services to not be COVID specific, to be healthcare specific, HHS specific, that will live long after the pandemic. So we will be pivoting again in terms of who we are going to bring in. So let us know if you're interested, and we're going to start to, in maybe a few months, start to shift in how we're offering that service.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diana. So in closing, I just want to thank you for sharing your resilience knowledge and expertise with us today. Diana has provided us with excellent resilience tools to add to your leadership tool belt. And I hope that the learnings from this webinar encourages you to pause, reset, and nourish throughout your day, and helps you carry on with your leadership capabilities, especially as we face an uncertain future and hard decisions about how we will start returning to other clinical activities at our sites. Just want to note that the webinar is recorded and will be available on Monday of next week on the HHS YouTube page. And I'm just going to hand it over to Sandra for the last word.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Diana. That was an excellent presentation and webinar. We really appreciate your expertise and how relevant the topic is for all of us. Again, I'd like to send out a great thank you to all of you who have joined. We hope to have you on our next webinar, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day and weekend, and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks, everyone. Take care.